had the privilege of speaking with the winner of the Philadelphia Citywide Challenge, addressing health issues for today's millennials. Her name is Nicole Kenney. Her story, in so many ways, is similar to the challenges faced by many Black women, yet she is able to achieve despite self-doubts, and with the help of others, she is succeeding. Her story is encouraging and raises the possibility that, put in the right environment with the proper support, we may all discover that there is a winner in all of us. I've broken down her story into 4 20 to 30 minute segments for you to consider and then discuss with another woman, your daughter, or friend. Starting segment 1, the formative years, not following the straight path.
I'm from West Philly, born and raised, and I lived in Jersey for a little bit, but I came back to Philadelphia in 11th grade. And so I moved away 6th grade, so about 6th grade to 10th grade, I was in southern New Jersey. And then when I moved back in 11th grade, I came back to Philly, and I lived in the Overbrook section, which is still West Philly. And that was really a pivotal point in my life. And the reason was because in Jersey, we were actually one of the few Black families in the neighborhood. And so I had an interesting experience being in spaces, not seeing many Black girls, seeing Black girls who really had all these goals and different ambitions, didn't really have a super strong support system. I have a very strong family, but in terms of actual community. And so when I left New Jersey, if I'm candid, I almost left a shell of myself. I moved to Jersey, a very vibrant Black girl, and I came back a very shy, insecure Black girl. And I highlight that because I went to a school, Hallahan High School for Girls, which unfortunately closed this year. It was the first Catholic all-girls school in the country. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time outside of my family and in my church community that I had been surrounded by girls just like me. Mm-hmm. It was the first time that I had teachers of every race who invested in me, who spoke life into me. Sure. And so that was really pivotal. And that was the first time, and I know we'll talk about Hey Auntie in the future, but when I really saw the power of women in communities of women, communities of girls, because I was a teenager at that time, as support systems, people to help you thrive, laugh with, just do life with. And that has really just guided me in my work. I have 3 younger sisters, so I come from all girls. My mom and dad have been married now 39 years.
Impressive.
Yeah, 39 years. They met in college. We have a very close family, so my auntie is like my second mom. Her and my mom are very close. Yes. And, we just always, my mom and my auntie just always instilled in us, I am a woman of faith. So that, I'm a girl with a purpose. I'm here uniquely equipped and designed to do special work. That was always instilled in me. So once I really came back to Philly in 11th grade, I would say that's when my life drastically changed, because it was the first time I had those community of not even just Black girls, but Black girls, brown girls, Asian, all of them who were just super quirky, fun, and smart. Sure. And really just kind of gave me a new idea of who I could be, both as a teenager and then certainly in the future.
What I find interesting is you said you had a strong family support system, but still you felt that without that camaraderie of girls your age, that you lost something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think especially too, and I think research shows that at some point your peer group has a lot more influence on your identity and your sense of self. And that's why I have such a heart for Gen Zers right now. Yes. Because social media, I can't even imagine what that feels like. But yeah, when you're not in community with other folks who have lived shared experiences, especially if you are someone who wants to do a lot with your life and kind of affirm that, it's challenging.
And so did you know you wanted to go to college? Did you know?
Yeah,
Smith is an interesting choice.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Again, if I'm going to be super candid, when I was in New Jersey, I knew I was going to college. That's something that I had seen, but my standards weren't that high. You know, and I'm just beyond, and that's just because of the environment I was in.
Right.
You know, I knew I was going, but I never thought to like shoot for the stars.
Yes.
When I came back to Philly was really the first time I was around Black girls who were shooting for the stars.
Okay, that were excelling.
Absolutely, yeah. And so then I was like, well, if they're shooting, you know, and I should maybe even say about Smith, because it might be helpful, is I actually transferred to Smith my sophomore year.
From?
The college in New Rochelle, which is a small liberal arts women's college in New York. The really interesting thing, and you might hear it be like this recurring theme in my life, is I had already committed to college in New Rochelle. And I was still at Hallahan, and this is like the end of the year. And you know how guidance counselors would come in and kind of just promote the different colleges. Sure. Well, a woman came in to promote a college. I have no idea what college this was. And she and I just happened to talk. And I told her, well, this is a college that I decided to go to. And she said to me, have you ever heard of Smith? That's how I found out about Smith. It was this Black girl, this Black woman who was like a guidance counselor from another college. It wasn't Smith.
Really?
She's the one who said to me, have you ever thought about Smith?
Do you know why she was suggesting Smith to you?
I don't know. We were just, I can't even remember that far.
Okay.
But I only mentioned that because I went on to go to the college in New Rochelle. And Smith, I'm like, well, thank you for telling me, but I'm already going to another school. But I mentioned that because, so I went to CNR. What was really interesting, and I think maybe it's helpful, remember when I talk about New Jersey, I was kind of reclaiming my identity that I actually was smart, because I didn't feel like I was smart necessarily until I came back to Philadelphia.
So it wasn't a racial identity. I mean, it wasn't that you were having a struggle with race per se. Mm-hmm. It was more of a female struggle.
No, I would say both. I would say, especially when it relates to Black women and Black girls, I don't think you can separate the two. I think. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Oh no.
So my follow-up question is: I would have thought, given that, you would have gone to an HBCU.
No, so what's interesting is I did apply I got into Hampton. So I wanted to go to Hampton, but like a lot of folks, Hampton just didn't give me the most money. Oh. So let me be clear. All right. Yeah, so you're right. Right. So of course, yes. I applied to Hampton and Spelman. I didn't get into Spelman.
Yes.
Hampton I got in, yes. didn't get enough money.
Yes.
On college in New Rochelle gave me the money. So you follow the money. I thank you for calling that out. But I only mentioned that in the story because when I went to college in New Rochelle, that is when I really excelled. I mean, I really took off there. And so my first year, my GPA was like near perfect. I had like a 3.9. Mm-hmm. Teachers were asking me to be TAs. They were recommending me for everything. Got moved to the honors college. Yes. And so then at that point, I thought...
And what was happening? What was happening to you that made the difference?
I'm a woman of faith. I don't know. It was just like, you need more preparation time. But it was also my teacher. It was just people were constantly investing in me. Sure. They were giving me opportunities and I was just excelling. And I think that fire was lit in high school. That 11th and 12th grade, I began to see myself differently and think differently. And then when I was at the college in New Rochelle and I'm continuing to be stretched, and then professors asked me to be a TA. I'm like, huh? And, coming from a place where no one saw much in me, and I'm now in these environments where people are seeing everything in me.
That's right.
Then that's when I was like,
blossomed.
I did. I mean, yes. I really did. And that's when I realized, I said, you know what? Maybe I can try this again. So I decided to transfer. And when I decided... Because where you were wasn't a challenge? I wanted to be challenged more. Okay. I wanted to be challenged more. And right, like that's the story of my life. And so then, so when I began to think about schools again, that's when Smith came up again. I had applied to some other schools that were kind of more peer-to-peer. And I had heard this woman say to me in high school, have you thought about Smith? And that's what brought me to Smith. So I had applied to Smith. She
planted a seed.
Literally. That's why I have to kind of tell that story. Because people are like, how did you? And so I said, and it was I was scared to death because transferring to Smith is like slim to none. I mean, the chances of getting in are small. But I figured, why not? I had applied to some other schools as well. My professors were ecstatic about writing recommendations for me. I thought I thought it would be like, oh, I don't have time.
Sure.
They supported me and everything like that. And so December the 13th, I can't remember the year exactly, but I remember Drumline, it came out because I was going to see the movies. I'll never forget this. And I was just so nervous because I was like, Nicole, why did you shoot that high? Whatever. And I remember they had called me. The admissions department called you and they left a message on my phone. And I thought they were going to tell me, you missed something in your application, whatever. And they said, congratulations, you've been accepted. And my life really has taken off since then.
So you started Smith as a
sophomore.
sophomore.
First year sophomore. Yep.
Okay. So the story continues.
I know, right? Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And then you graduate with a degree in
government and psychology. Yeah.
How did those two go together?
Yes. So for me, I feel like they're like natural. I wanted to always be a lawyer. And so my dad's a lawyer. And so, I thought I was going to be a lawyer as well. And Smith is a little different. Like other schools that have like poli-sci. Smith doesn't have poli-sci. It has like government. But it's kind of like the same thing. But I've always been interested in how people think and why people do what they do. And I remember there was this book we read in our political theory class, and I hope I don't mispronounce it, I'm misremembering this, but I believe it's called Plato's Republic. And it was basically about the polis and the origination of the first city. And it talked about like all the different people who are in charge of making sure that this city operates in a way that the city can prosper. And this is theory. This is a poly theory course. And I remember sitting there thinking, well, who gets to decide how the city operates, and if certain people are in charge and only certain people, there was this real question I had about access. There was this concept called philosopher kings, and these people were people in the city who kind of controlled the information that was available to people. And so for me, that just was always fascinating to me. First, as someone who always wanted to affect change in my community, that was more like the government aspect of me, and advocating for folks who aren't fairly represented.
Sure.
But then the psychology part was, well, who gets the opportunity to do it, and more importantly, and what are the reasons for why they do what they do or don't do what they do. So I think that's where my interest in public policy came from, because it's like, okay, it's not just a matter of having good policies, but who's shaping these policies? Why do they get to decide the policies? What's the framework that they're operating when it comes to these policies? And that why is why I really wanted to get a better understanding of just how people think and why they do what they do. And so yeah, it just kind of.
Okay, so you graduated with a double major.
I read a double major.
Thinking that I'm going to go to law school.
No. So here's the funny story is my first job out of undergrad, I was a buyer. I worked so here's another, my story is so fascinating. So I also love clothes. I love clothes. I love the way clothes can kind of express your identity.
Yes.
There's a whole thought process to why I present myself a certain way.
Yes.
And again, and what I should say about Smith, in case it's helpful, I also spent a semester in Australia. I studied at the University of Sydney.
So what were you studying?
Oh, same thing, Gov and Psych. So I took some international business classes and all those things.
Why Sydney?
Exactly. So because I'm a story, the funny thing is when I went to Smith, and I remember, because I think what you might hear is this constant expansion of just who I am and what I can do, and constantly being in spaces.
Or you realizing.
Or me realizing. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. I remember when I moved into my dorm at Smith, there were these girls talking, and I had traveled abroad, but only for like a week at a time, not for like a whole semester. And I heard these girls coming down, and we had something called JYA, Junior Year Abroad. The girls are talking, and she's like, I'm about to go to Spain for a year. And I remember thinking when I moved in, I was like, oh, I could never do that. The idea of living away somewhere else for a year seemed far-fetched to me. By the time it got my turn to go abroad, my question was, how far away can I go and get the biggest bang for my buck? And I had always, again, if you think about seeds, always been fascinated with Sydney. The Olympics were in Sydney. It was a beautiful place to go to Sydney. And I'm thinking in my mind, I can go to London anytime. I can go to Europe on my own. Yes. But I was like, when's another time? Because you had to pay the same amount wherever you went.
Okay.
I was like, when's another time I can go to Australia? I had met another black girl also named Nikki. She went to Australia. And I think that I have to always give credit to Smith about, because the longer I was there, the less barriers I felt like I had. So I was just like, let's go. So, I did it. So I say that, all that to say, my first job as a buyer, literally what happened, I've loved clothes. I love it as an expression. And we were looking for different jobs. And I went to my CDO, career development place, whatever. At this time, they used to have books with like the HR managers and their emails. So I'm kind of old maybe. And I saw this opportunity to work for Ross. I love Ross, So I was like,
let me just
stop. Sure, yeah.
And so the thought of going to law school is like on hold, or it's faded at this point?
Yeah, it might have just faded at that point.
And this has nothing to do with government policy. May have something to do with psychology.
So still just figuring it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm just figuring it out, and it just sounded really fun. Like, and it was just this book. And even on campus, I was always stylish, so that was just part of who I was. So I went for it and I got it, and that was wild too, because I didn't know this at the time. Most times when you go into buying, you go to schools like FIT or the things like, FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology, or other fashion schools, because there's a whole like thing around being a buyer, and things like that. And so I say it's a favor of God.
So you didn't have that?
No. Mm-mm.
So why do you think in retrospect they selected you?
One of the things that they had always told me was just my passion, my willing to learn. I think they were always, and people have commented that for me, I want to shoot for the stars, to show up in a place and be like, I'm here, this is what I can do. I think a lot of skills, the more that I learn, are transferable. And I should say, I didn't stay there long. I realized, maybe this isn't for me. But what I think Smith taught me and continues to teach me is that there's no harm in trying.
Yeah.
There's no harm in trying, and it taught me a lot, even more as a black woman. And what I will mean by that is I didn't realize that there are few black buyers. I didn't know that. Because I was just like, I was there. So I worked in the fashion district and everything like that. I went to showrooms, brands. I did all that. And then I realized, to your earlier point, that I'm probably being called in a different direction. But I don't think any time is wasted, And so that exposure, and my first job being in the heart of New York. And what I also mentioned, I commuted. So most people move to New York.
Yes.
Not me. This is before it was in vogue. Now everybody has no problem commuting from New York to Philly. But for me, my dad would wake up every morning, and at 5:30, he would drive me to the train station, get there about 6. I would get to the office probably about 8:30. It was a 2-hour door-to-door commute, and then 2 hours coming home. I refused to pay New York prices. Yeah. I just refused. There was no way I was going to do it.
So how long did you do this?
About like 6 or 7 months. Wow. I did it. And obviously, I kind of did it again when I worked in D.C., but it was a little bit shorter. But I realized it wasn't sustainable. I couldn't bring my full self because I'm tired.
That's a lot.
But that in terms of, again, and I think when I talk to you about just like the role of like psychology and who has the power when it comes to information, even when it comes to who's choosing the clothes that go in your store. Absolutely. Who's choosing how much it's being marked up? Sure. There's not for this part, but there's a lot of things I heard while I was in that industry. I'm a big thrift shopper. Yes. I refuse to pay market price, because of what I see and what I know. So, and then
interesting.
It's
very interesting. And I should just say, for those, this is not a visual, but if they could see you, they would see that you are a very stylish person.
Oh, that's the thing. I can look sharp on $1. Like, I know how much. I know quality. And that's something my auntie has taught me, is quality of fabric and things like that. Sure. But then I know brands. So I know how much. Because I'm the one who will mark it up. Exactly. I know the markup.
You learned about markup.
Yeah.
And you learned about the psychology of shopping. Because I think we all know we're paying overpriced but that sort of makes us feel good in a twisted type
Absolutely.
of way.
Yeah. And especially what that means for Black folks as well.
Self-value and
exactly
esteem. That's right.
And what does it mean when you're actually purchasing from places that don't even necessarily even support you?
Right.
You know, so there was a lot
of...
So
you have to be fairly secure where you say,
absolutely,
I can spend $1 in that and I will look good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I will feel good.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't diminish
it doesn't diminish
anyway.
Absolutely. And I understand that, though. I'm really big. When I was at Smith, we took a class called Psychology of the Black Experience. And I think it's important because I do understand that a lot of us as Black folks, that is sometimes can be a source of identity and value for us.
Yes.
And I don't begrudge folks for that because sometimes life can be so hard
that
you want to feel, so I understand that. But I think if you're aware of that, and more importantly, that you're aware that people market to that. You know what I mean?
People prey
on that. That's the word.
Right.
They prey on it.
They take advantage of
it.
Yeah.
They take advantage of it. That's really when I was like, oh, no, I'm at the dollar store. Yeah.
All right, so now back on track.
Right, yeah.
So you're a buyer.
Oh, so I'm a buyer, and I just realized, you know what? It is probably ain't it. So I just came back to Philly. I worked at an organization in Philadelphia called Innovation Philadelphia, and I worked there for about 3 years. And what was really interesting was at this time, Philadelphia was not the city it was now. So I think I was like in my mid-20s at that time. And so Innovation Philadelphia was a city organization that was actually started by Mayor Street. So you could see this is a while ago. And their job was to really brand Philadelphia as a place to live, work, and play, especially for younger professionals.
That's right.
Because at this time, we had real brain drain. Folks will come here, then they're out. New York, D.C., nobody wants to be in Philly. And so what my job was, we were starting to talk about the innovation economy. I think it was like Richard Florida or something like that. It was this whole concept, and people couldn't get themselves around like the knowledge economy and the tech economy, especially in Philadelphia. Because people
could not.
No, and not at that time, because Philadelphia is still, we just didn't have that identity. That was like New York, that was like DC, that was like Silicon Valley, but that wasn't Philly. But that was really what the elected officials were trying to do, though, because they wanted more companies here, they wanted the young professionals here, was to brand Philly as a place where creativity was happening. And it was. Again, we talked about sometimes people don't know what's there. It was there. There's a vibrant, always has been a vibrant creative community here. But I just say that to say one of my jobs was to create programs. And what I did specifically is I created programs for entrepreneurs, young professionals, and creatives. And so I would create different events and things like that to basically connect folks in the community to the resources in the city. So one of the, so for instance, I don't know if they still do it, Center City Sips. They had launched it back then, and it was like different bars would have like these special happy hours, like on Wednesday. And what I did is, for instance, I would work with them and I would partner with a young professional organization. So I knew there'd be an influx of young folks coming to the bar. Yes. They could also learn about resources. And so...
How would they learn? Just from networking?
Yeah, and I would actually have the young professional orgs there. So like, for instance, I did like a young professional showcase one time where I was like, okay, we know we're having all these young folks here. Let's bring all the resources that are available to young folks. Because when you're young, you're a you're a transplant. You just might not know that things are happening. So I guess I should say, I've just always been a connector. I've always saying, this is here. And what happened was I just started getting tasked with putting together more events. Like, for instance, I did an event called MBA meets MFA. Mm-hmm. I remember, so actually where I met one of my really good friends who's now an advisor for Hey Auntie. But I had heard, because I guess I'm always listening. I'm always hearing. Sure. And I was at a meeting and I heard business folks saying they couldn't meet creative folks, and creative folks saying they couldn't meet business folks. So I was like,
yeah, two different universes.
And you're not going to cross paths unless there's a reason to. And so I created MBA meets MFA. It's not here anymore. It was the Lowe's used to have a restaurant down there. I can't remember what it was. But that's where it was. It was wildly successful. So all that to say, here I am learning, I don't even know how many years ago, about the innovation economy, the creative economy. I'm creating programs. I'm connecting people. And so that was really exciting. I was there for about 3 years. Mm-hmm. But I still began, to your earlier question, started to feel this real pull back to policy. Like, I really wanted to get back into doing this work. And I should say again, so you remember the woman mentioned Smith to me when I was at Hallahan. I began to, this might be helpful for someone who's hearing it, I began to look at grad schools to go to. And I had my list of grad schools, and they were all safe schools.
And why grad schools? Because you felt a need to...
Yeah, I just wanted to learn more about public policy, get more involved in like the
and
actual
you knew it was
rules.
public policy.
I did. You know, this might be an interesting... I don't know how this is going to make sense, but I'll just share it because it might be helpful. I remember one day, because I didn't end up going to law school. I remember one day I was at an event, and I know this woman didn't mean any harm, and I don't even know if this is coming across with me talking to you. I had actually always been painfully shy. Right. That's why I said maybe I have to share this. And a huge introvert. I mean, to the point that like talking in public and in class would give me palpitations. Like, that's why I feel like maybe I have to share this, because like maybe if it'll help one person.
You have to share it because that is not how you present yourself now.
No, but I still struggle with it, but I kind of have learned how to push past it. But I just want to say, so for instance, so I said to say, so I was also always very shy and very quiet, even though I'm in environments that obviously don't support that. But I just had to say, I was at an event, and this, I wasn't talking because I was like, I'm just shy or whatever. And this woman had said to me, well, what do you want to be? And I had told her I wanted to be a lawyer. And she said to me, how are you going to be a lawyer if you can't speak? And from that moment, I said, I'm not going to law school.
I'm going to learn to speak.
No. It was like, it almost felt like,
interesting.
It almost felt like if I have to be in some ways doing what I'm doing now, I'll just do something else, And so I thought that I could...
That's living with our limits.
Yeah. I thought I could kind of get away from then having to be this public-facing person and speaking and being called on.
Yes.
It's like, okay, fine, I just won't go to law school. So that was just something I just was like, that's all. So I say that to say going to policy, too, just also seemed like a more, like, not a safer, but it didn't seem like... it wasn't as, like, the Socratic method. That's all I was afraid of. Like, my dad would talk about, the Socratic method. But I was really also getting really just, again, oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Things are just coming back to me. When I was in Smith, my favorite class, I can't believe I missed this, was race and public policy. My favorite, when I tell you, like, I aced everything. Like, it was a class where I felt the most comfortable. It was a class where I learned about the NAACP, like, in full detail. When I really learned about laws and policy and how they impacted and shaped our experiences. So, again, that was planted. But I don't think it was until, like, this time where I was like, maybe I should go and pursue policy to do some more, like, meaningful work around my communities.
Something that I'm definitely interested in.
Yeah. And so... And which might be helpful is also the recession too, so, but I just had to say, so I'm thinking about all the schools that I want to go to. And, a friend of mine from Smith, and this might remind you when I talk about Hallahan and the network, because Smith was the same way. I was around these super smart, incredible women who just kind of operated at a different level. And I remember telling a friend of mine, she was like, that I wanted to go to get my degree in policy, and she was like, oh, you need to talk to my sister. Her sister was at Harvard. That was the other thing. Like, when I was younger, knowing someone from Harvard was like, whatever.
Yes.
By the time you got to Smith, it was like, Harvard, yeah, what else? Like, not what else, but it was more normal.
Yes.
So I remember talking to her sister at Harvard, and I'll never forget to this. I was telling her the schools I was going to go to, and she said, you need to aim higher. And I was like... Okay, so I just heard it, she said that to me. So long story long, when I was at Innovation Philadelphia, because I had not even thought about Hopkins. Like, it wasn't, kind of like Smith, it wasn't, even though I'm constantly stretching, it wasn't still kind of on my thing. And I was sent, because I was doing all these events, I was sent to an event somewhere here in Philly around Black businesses. And it was a breakfast. And I go to this event, and I sit at this table. There's only one other person at this table. It's a gentleman. And I start talking to him. And I said, oh, he's like, ask me questions. Older guy. And he says, I said, yeah, I'm thinking of going to grad school, for my policy degree. And I think I told him my schools. He's the one that said to me, have you considered Hopkins? That's when I applied to Hopkins. When he said that to me, I was like, oh, okay. So I heard that. I heard this other friend say, aim higher.
Right.
And so, again, I have my safety schools.
Yes.
I had some other schools that I aimed higher. I didn't get in, but I got into Hopkins. I still remember what happened with Hopkins. Professor called me. I was in a meeting, to tell me that similar to Smith, that I was accepted. And so, so then I moved to Hopkins, and then I started my policy career there in Baltimore.